All right, how is everybody doing today? Welcome to my channel. This is an educational channel where we focus on learning new and different theories of everything that you probably haven't heard of before. But if you did, they probably help your life, benefit you in untold ways, help you to organize your thoughts because they're all encompassing theories. And so all the other theories that you've put in your head, you can synthesize them and harmonize them and resolve them in your head. Once you gain a reliable, all-encompassing theory. And today is the 343rd video that we've done on the reciprocal system of theory from one Dewey Bernard Larson. And Mr. Larson was born in 1898, died in 1990, spent the last 60 years of his life working out the reciprocal system, the first half of which was an inductive process to go from his original epiphanies to his fundamental postulates, two fundamental postulates in the late 1950s. And then the second part of his research was 30 years of deductive work, where he took his initial two fundamental postulates and went through a process of deduction, if this, then that kind of thing, and arrived at a theoretical universe, how the universe would behave if his postulates were correct. And then he wrote books comparing how his postulates, how his findings, his theoretical universe matched up with the universe that the scientists had created over the course of thousands of years. So it was basically one guy against several civilizations over thousands of years, and Larson generally won that contest. He has books on physics and astrophysics, chemistry, astronomy, metaphysics, economics. He's got some chapters on psychic powers and dream interpretation, religion, and philosophy, ethics. And some of his followers, such as Dr. Bruce Peret, have books on, or at least writings on other topics even farther afield from, what's considered science. Larson's last book was called Beyond Space and Time, and it came out posthumously, published by Dorothy, his wife, and a lot of the followers of Larson were distraught by his wife's choice to publish that, and thought that Larson was, a strict scientist, and he would have never wanted his musings on such trivial subjects as metaphysics to ever be published. These were just his private notes to himself. Hard to say, but it looks like his writing Beyond Space and Time is fairly complete and cohesive. So I do believe that Larson would have wanted that to be published. And we'll be looking at that work a little bit here today in looking at Dr. Bruce Peret's second half of his article that is called The Fundamental Postulates, RS2-102. And RS2 is something that Dr. Bruce Peret and Dr. K.V.K. Nehru came up with mostly after Larson passed away, as the re-evaluation of the reciprocal system. Larson believed that the reciprocal system was correct, but that he was subject to error in how he derived the system, and that he might have made some mistakes in his deductions, and that he encouraged people to find those mistakes and correct them. So that's what these folks have done, and I think they did a bang-up job, almost on the level of Larson's work himself. Now, just to give you some clarity about what the reciprocal system is about, more or less, Larson is claiming that we live in a universe that is made solely and entirely of motion. Veering sharply away from the ancient Greeks, who thought the universe was made out of matter, and 2,500 years later, then Einstein comes along with E equals mc squared. It looks like it's made out of matter, but it's really made out of energy. And other people have attempted, including Einstein, spent the last 20 years of his life trying to find the unified field, to unify the force fields of gravity and electricity and magnetism, the strong nuclear force, which is completely made up, and as well as the weak nuclear force, and how to integrate all of those forces. But for Larson, matter, energy, force, these are all just forms of motion. They are different kinds of motion, and they are representable specifically and exclusively by space and time. That is how Larson defined motion, as the relationship between space and time. In fact, as the first part of this article that we read yesterday mentions, Larson, in his first formulation of his fundamental postulates, he revised his fundamental postulates a number of times over the years. In his first formulation from the late 1950s, he said that the universe is made out of space-time. He eventually changed that to the universe is made out of motion. Motion is the relationship between space and time. So at first he used the term space-time. Then he eventually used the term motion. And late in his life, he actually embraced the term change in 3 dimensions. And so for Larson, the universe is made out of motion. Motion is the relationship between space and time. This sets up a generalized reciprocal relationship between space and time. Motion can be described by fraction, with time or space as the numerator and space or time as the denominator. Speed, for example, is the most accessible kind of motion to us. Speed is expressible by space over time. The bicycle is moving 10 miles per hour, 10 miles of space in 1 hour of time. Or acceleration. I dropped the ball out the window, and the ball fell at 32 feet per second per second. That is time, space over time to the second power, acceleration. Energy. It took me 3 hours to move that thing 2 miles. 3 hours. 3 hours to push that thing 2 miles. 3 hours of time in 2 hours of space. Time over space, energy. And force. Force is time over space to the second power. And so that would be, kind of a conjugate of acceleration, which is space over time to the second power. And then we also have matter. Matter is time to the third power over space to the third power. So all of these different motions and many others, including pressure, time over space to the fourth power, electric current, electric charge, electrical capacitance, electrical resistance, magnetic flux, permeability, permittivity, viscosity and fluidity. These are all expressible in terms of time and space only. So this is a wonderful system because it's way simpler than the MKS system, which bogs down matters by using meter, kilogram, seconds. The kilogram part is what is the killer there, because the kilogram is a representation of mass, which is time to the third power over space to the third power. So, when you're trying to calculate using the MKS system, it's very difficult to figure out the units. But if you just have two components, time and space, it's much easier to reckon equations and historical equations, and see if they're correct, see if at least they match out in terms of units, because you only have two components. Now, there are some kind of caveats to the universe is made out of space and time. Universe is made out of motion. Motion is the relationship between space and time. That sets up as space. For thousands of years, we've thought of space and time as really being the container of the universe. But we now, with Larson's system, we have to also see the universe as being the contents of the universe. It's not only the stage upon which the events occur, but it is also the actors upon the stage that are made of space and time as well. So now you also have what Larson calls coordinate time and coordinate space. Space and time both come in 3 dimensions. Space and time have the identical qualities because they are reciprocals of one another. So space and time both have their 3-dimensional aspects, coordinate space and coordinate time, x, y, z coordinates. And then space and time both progress, what Larson calls clock time and clock space. Time is always getting later and later and later and later. And the space version of that is space is always getting farther and farther and farther apart. This is what Larson calls a scalar motion. This is a motion that is known by science, but not really investigated for its properties. They put it in the closet as basically like a kind of irrelevant form of motion, but Larson puts it at the center as kind of the most basic kind of motion. Scalar motion, a motion with a magnitude but no particular direction, that you can map out or visualize best with a balloon with dots on it. You blow up the balloon, all the dots are moving away from each other, but they're not moving in any specific direction. They're moving in all directions, and they don't acquire a direction until you assign a reference point. When you decide arbitrarily that one of the points, one of the reference points, one of the dots is not moving, that's when you can determine direction. So not before that. So the direction does not belong to the motion, it belongs to the reference system. And then time and space also come in only discrete units, meaning that there's a minimum unit of space, a quantum of space, and a quantum of time. If you don't have a full unit, then you don't have anything. It's kind of like, anything in nature. You don't have you don't have a third of an apple growing on the tree. You either have a full apple or you don't have anything. And even if you start chopping the apple up into little pieces, you still, you know, each one of them is one entity in and of itself, one quantum, all the way till you get down to the atom. Okay, now, if you have exactly 1 unit of space in 1 unit of time, remembering that space over time is speed, 1 unit of space in 1 unit of time is the constant, the speed of light. And so, you know, for hundreds of years, or since Michelson-Morley experiment in 1887 or so, you know, we're trying to figure out, why is the speed of light a constant? And the speed of light is, it's really the speed of the progression of the natural reference system. Space is expanding at the speed of light in all directions. And so any body that is actually motionless is moving outward at the speed of light. So really, the photon, the light particle, is the only particle that or not the only, one of the only particles that is actually motionless in the natural reference system. And that's why it's always moving at the speed of light, because that is the expansion of space itself. And also, if you have what Larson calls this unit speed, if you have unit speed, then that basically means that half of the universe is moving faster than the speed of light, along with half that's moving slower than the speed of light, which is flying in the face of Einstein's dictum that says that the speed of light is the maximum speed of the universe. So that basically sets up 2 sectors of Larson's universe: the cosmic sector, which is moving faster than the speed of light, and the material sector, moving slower than the speed of light. In the material sector, you have coordinate space and you have clock time, 3 dimensions of space moving through time, always getting later and later and later and later. But in the cosmic sector, you have 3 dimensions of time, and you have clock space. Space is always getting farther and farther and farther apart. And, you know, in the material sector, you have material atoms. In the cosmic sector, you have cosmic atoms. And a cosmic atom is known by legacy science as an antimatter. But Larson prefers to call it cosmic matter. Now, let's get around to reading some of Dr. Peret's commentary on the fundamental postulates. That is basically the first fundamental postulate. The universe is made out of space, out of motion. Motion is the relationship between space and time. Universe is made out of motion. It comes in 3 dimensions, in discrete units, and with 2 reciprocal aspects, space and time. The second postulate is that the universe conforms to the relationships of ordinary commutative mathematics. Its primary magnitudes are absolute, and its geometry is Euclidean. Now, he went through those things quite a bit in the first half of this paper. In the second half, he's going into the section extending beyond space and time. And these are dealing with some of Larson's metaphysical postulates, because in order to come up with his book Beyond Space and Time, his last book, he had to recognize that his 2 fundamental postulates did not cover such things as life phenomena and mental phenomena. And so he had to come up with 4 new postulates to describe those things. Now, the beauty of Peret's work is that he alters the 2 fundamental postulates which make the four metaphysical postulates unnecessary. And I think he goes through this in RS2-103. So we'll be starting that tomorrow. But we're going to go into the section extending beyond space and time. After researching biology and ethics, Larson discovered that his fundamental postulates did not apply to the universe described by these topics. Life, in many ways, acted exactly opposite to the way inanimate structure should, and concepts such as self-sacrifice remained totally outside the scope of the universe of motion. To correct this, he began observations of the way biologic life and ethical behavior occurred in nature, and defined these observations in a set of 4 metaphysical postulates. Okay, and the first one, there are existences in the metaphysical region of a more general and less restricted type than the units of motion that are the basic constituents of the physical universe. 2, the metaphysical existences are logical, orderly, and rational. And 3, metaphysical existence conforms to a specific set of laws and principles different in some respects from those of the physical universe. And 4, the metaphysical existences of which we have evidence are intelligence. The book, Beyond Space and Time, was an attempt to create a larger, more encompassing artificial reality that would include the physical universe, the biological universe, and the ethical universe as subsets, which Larson defined as 3 levels of existence. The first is the inanimate, material or cosmic sectors as matter or antimatter, described by the fundamental postulates, the 2 fundamental postulates. Also then, the biologic level, material and cosmic sectors interacting as living cells. Okay, so the life unit comes about from the combination of a material and cosmic atom or entity. Now, if a material and cosmic entity interfere with one another, they generally annihilate each other. But if they interact at the right angle and in the right proportions, then that explosion becomes an explosion of life as opposed to an annihilation explosion. And then third level is ethical. Neither material nor cosmic sectors, creating a new ethical sector. Larson's approach to creating artificial realities was unique in that his theories had a logical cutoff point defined by his levels of existence, sort of discrete units of observation. He did not try to force a cell to conform to chemical laws, but rather observed life in nature, and from those observations attempted to define a separate artificial reality that he could then correlate with his other theories and connect them on common ground, that being the concept of motion. Okay, this section is called the manifest realm. Because space, time, and motion all possess the same properties, namely discrete units and 3 dimensions, the situation arises that there are multiple artificial realities created using Larson's commandments. Now, in the previous paper, he had gone through, the difference between natural law and artificial law. The natural law is an observation about the way nature behaves, whereas artificial law is a commandment about how nature behaves. So he's saying that Larson is using an artificial reality created using Larson's commandments. When we normalize time, reducing it to unity, we can make it a constant and end up with 3 dimensions of coordinate space and the constant of clock time. Larson refers to this as the material sector and is observable and measurable, but still an artificial reality that forms a consensus with our body's physical senses. Another situation is where space is normalized to unity, acting like a clock, and time has 3 dimensions. Larson calls this artificial reality. All right, sorry about the interruption there. The phone overheated, and so I'm going to try to finish the video and then glue them together. So we were in this section here. Another situation is where space is normalized to unity, acting like a clock, and time has 3 dimensions. Larson calls this artificial reality the cosmic sector, named after the origin of cosmic background radiation. Whereas we can only observe and measure 3 dimensions of space, we cannot directly observe clock space, nor the 3 dimensions of time associated with it. Both of these artificial realities operate simultaneously, so we end up with 3 dimensions of space on the outside with constant clock time, and 3 dimensions of time on the inside with constant clock space. In other words, these little unit-sized chunks of 3D time arranged on a 3D spatial grid. We call the chunks of 3D time atoms, and the arrangements on the 3D grid structure on the 3D grid structure. Okay, so atoms and structure. The diagram on the next page, which I don't have, is an entity relationship diagram that shows how Larson's postulates relate to each other as natural or scalar observations, artificial or coordinate commandments, and the logic he used to connect them together. Okay, now that is the end of the article. This is an article that Dr. Peret wrote back in 2012. And so he's saying that the scalar aspect, clock space and clock time, are the natural observations, whereas the artificial observations are the commandments, are coordinate space and coordinate time, 3 dimensions of space, 3 dimensions of time. Those only are the result of our situation in the reference system. Okay, now some of that might be a bit confusing, but I think if we begin to read, which we will tomorrow, this RS2-103, the re-evaluation, he will go into these postulates a little bit more and clarify some of the key points, and then he's going to eventually be able to kind of get rid of these 4 metaphysical postulates and incorporate them into the 2 fundamental postulates by altering the 2 fundamental postulates in fairly minor ways in order that they will accommodate all of the metaphysical postulates. Okay, we'll be doing that tomorrow. So thanks for tuning in today. Have a great day.